The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
The question is, what is a self? Like, what is myself? Because I think for me, I guess expressing myself would be probably just showing the insides of my brain, like the way that my brain works and the kind of lyrics that I like. I guess when I said I'm not expressing myself, I rarely sit down to go, I'm feeling this way today. Let me tell you about how I'm feeling. It tends to be more like, I had an idea. I saw two things that went together, and let me show you how I think they correlate. And I guess that is self-expression because I'm expressing my mind. But it's, I guess I think of it, it's not catharsis for me. It's not emotional catharsis. Yeah.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. For nearly 20 years, Ben Shive has been producing and collaborating with musicians including, but not limited to, J.J. Heller, Colony House, Ellie Holcomb, Dave Barnes, The Grey Havens, Andrew Peterson, Melanie Penn, Randall Goodgame, Sandra McCracken, Jill Phillips, and Keith and Kristen Getty. He recently signed on as a writer for Getty Music. Ben sat down to talk with me about hymn writing and the benefits and frustrations of limits. Ben Shive, I am super excited to have you on the Habit Podcast. I love talking to you about writing and collaboration, and so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we've had this on the dock for a long time. I keep on running into you at Belmont, and every time I see you there, we talk about doing this. So I'm glad we made it happen.
Well, here we are; it's happening. So you, in the last, I don't know, is it year or so, you've been. Tell me about this thing you're doing with the Gettys. And in Getty in the Getty cinematic universe.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it kind of snuck up on me. I was just minding my business and doing what I've always done, which is kind of producing like independent, literary, kind of poetic singer-songwriters with a sort of indie bent, and had been doing that for a long time. And then right around the time COVID happened, I got called by Keith Getty to do a record for he and his wife that was going to be kind of right up my alley, sort of orchestral and quiet and stuff that I love to do. It was the first time working with them, and it was great. And then somewhere midstream on that record, he called me and he said, he kind of pitched me this idea of signing on with their team as a writer. And it couldn't have, I did not expect it, did not expect to be interested. And it couldn't have come at a better time because I think probably when we're having this phone call, I was, 39 or 40. And I had just reached the point where I was creeping up on 100 records that I'd produced. And when you produce in bulk like that, and you're approaching midlife, you're just primed to have the thought of like, what does it mean? What am I doing? I'm going to make another record. It's going to give someone another 2 to 3 years of artist life, and then not be forgotten necessarily, but it can feel like that, you know. It can feel like we're going to do another one, and then who knows what happens to it. They never call, they never write, you know, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I was really kind of at that point of going like, what is it? What am I doing? And what does it mean? I recognize that might make it sound like I'm dissing someone or something, and I'm really not at all. It's just the fact that I believe, and I still believe in all the artists that I've worked with, and I'm so glad that I've served them and their careers, but I just had hit a point where at the very least I needed to change the lateral move. But I think I also might have just needed a mission that felt like a little bigger than me, and a little bigger even than any one artist. And Keith's whole pitch was kind of like, he told me that he wanted to supply the church with a hymnal, and I think he meant that in a metaphorical sense, even though I think he's also working on a hymnal. But he wanted to give the church a collection of songs that would last more than 20 years. Because, you know, when you write pop music for the church, which is great, I'm glad people are writing pop music for the church, and sometimes I do. But when you do that, you're giving the church a collection of songs to sing that they won't want to sing in 20 years because they're going to sound stupid. Like pop music is like a cool haircut. It's like, it looks dumb in photographs in 15 years. And so he was like, my goal is to write songs that could still sound just as out of style in 100 years as they do now. So you could teach them to your grandchildren, you know, and well, in 100 years, you won't be teaching anything to anyone, but you know what I'm saying? And he said, he was like, I've been writing songs since I wrote In Christ Alone. And he was like, I'm not sure if I've written another good song since In Christ Alone, but I'm just going to keep on doing it. And like something about that might sound jaded or something, but it was like the magic words to me of just kind of like, there's a humility in just going, hey, we're just going to keep on trying, and we're probably mostly going to fail. And maybe we'll succeed once or twice. And if we do, we will have accomplished something that's got a shelf life that goes way beyond us. And that was just the right words for me at that moment. So I kind of asked my friends, asked Andrew, you know, is this something you could see me doing? Because I'm not sure if I can see me doing it. I've never thought about doing it. Everybody was like, you should try it. What's the worst that could happen? And I'm so glad I did, for a number of reasons. One is like, I think one of the things that I was feeling as I approached 40 was just the loneliness of being a producer. That like, I'm always with someone, but I'm always sort of separate from them in a way. Like we're united in that we're trying to do something, but at the end of the day, we kind of go our separate ways. And there's a little more, even though it's all friendships, it can feel a little more transactional, all that kind of stuff. And so I was starting to just kind of feel like I was wishing that I was part of a team. And that's one thing that I got when I signed on with Keith, because Keith has a stable, it's grown now, but I think when I signed on, there were maybe 9 writers. And when I go into that room, everyone in that room can play the piano as well or better than me, which is amazing. That's a great room to be in for me. It's a great opportunity to be around people who have a musical depth that exceeds mine. And that's supposed to be the thing that I'm good at. And then all these people also have like degrees. They're really educated people, which I'm not really. I'm musically educated, but beyond that, not really. And so it's an amazing room to be in because it's people who are practicing my same craft, but they also like, there's so much to be learned from them. I feel like I'm in good company musically, but I'm definitely challenged musically as well. So pretty amazing to be a part of a team, and amazing to just have a reason to write. You know, I wrote a couple of solo records in the about 10 years ago, and I love them and I love those songs, and I've continued to write those kind of songs, but it's difficult to write those kind of songs when there's not a place to put them or a way to like because of the fact that production pays for my family's life, and I have 4 kids,
Right.
and that's what we do.
Yeah.
It has made it difficult to find a way to, sustainably keep on writing songs for Ben Shive. And so to have someone say, "I would like to pay you to write songs," was pretty amazing. Like,
Yeah.
gave
Now,
me a
are
way to
you
get
out of
back
the producing business now?
No, I am still in the producing business. What I did actually, that's a whole nother, that's so Midwestern of me to say whole nother, but
Yeah, right.
that's a whole other thing. So yes, I'm still producing. At the time that I started doing the Getty thing, I knew that I was going to have to find a way to carve out time to write. I was going to owe them something like, I owe them 5 songs a year, but because it's all co-writing and so I only keep a percentage of each song, it's more like I need to write 15 to 20 songs a year. And I knew I needed to carve out the time to do that. I was working with the Hellers at the time, and they had this idea of like, hey, we work every day from 10 to 6. Usually sometime around 3 in the afternoon, we all just want to go home. What if we went home? Like, what if we called it a day every day at 3? What would happen to our productivity? Because we also noticed that I get fatigued around 3 in the afternoon from creativity and decision making and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And everything gets harder. Everything turns into a slog from 3 to 6.
Yeah.
So we started going home every day, somewhere between 2:30 and 3, and our productivity didn't change at all.
Wow.
Like we continued to, like, I would, up to that point, I was writing so what I do for the Hellers is I write orchestra music. So I was writing an orchestration about every 2 days. And now, working 3 hours less a day, I'm actually writing an orchestration about every 1 day.
Wow.
So, and that's because part of that is just that I've gotten better and quicker, but also cutting off that last 3 hours of the day was just cutting off the worst part of the day.
Yeah.
And so, basically, once I figured out that worked, I just kind of applied that to everything I work on now. Anytime I'm producing, I just produce about 10 to 3, and then we go our merry way, and that gives me 3 to 6 every day to write. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah. So I've got, and some of those days I end up doing busy work or, other things that have to not slip through the cracks, but I definitely get to write a lot more than I used to.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's been really amazing.
So we say you got the team of writers over at Getty was 9 people when you got there. I guess it's bigger now.
Yeah. It might be 11 or 12.
Right.
Yeah.
And are these people all in Nashville, and y'all are just sitting in the same room together?
No, they're from all over the place. Like, for example, there's a guy named Matt Boswell, who's a pastor in Texas and is just a great writer and lyricist. So he comes in. Laura Story, who used to travel with Andrew and me right when I started with Andrew. Laura lives down in Atlanta, so she comes up. Yeah, so people are from all over. Yeah. About probably 5 or 6 of us are from Nashville. Sky Peterson's on that team. She lives here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are writing, we're calling these hymns.
Yeah.
Maybe call them worship music.
I'm curious, if you had to define hymn right now, as a subset of worship music, how would you define it?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I guess I would think of it in terms of, I'm not going to be able to give a good definition. No,
it's great.
I think of it as being wordier.
Yeah. For
better or worse. Yeah. Mostly better. As far as I like wordier songs with complete sentences. And not exactly telling a story, distinct from a sort of a praise chorus that relies on repetition, but rather progresses through verses and probably has a refrain or a chorus. But you put me on the spot. I don't know.
No, man, that's actually, I feel like that's one of the best answers that I've ever heard. That's really, really good. That kind of hits on some things I've not quite been able to put into words. We've had this conversation a few times, and one of the other things that we've come up with is that it tends to sing well without accompaniment, whereas modern, like pop music, tends to rely on the rhythms of the accompaniment. to make it work. So that's going to mean that it's going to have rhythms that are easy to follow, and it's usually going to have a little more of a melody, whereas pop music can kind of drone on one note, and it's interesting because the band is interesting. So I think that's one part of it. But I think what you said about it's less reliant on repetition. That's huge. And I think it reads a little more like it tends to read metrically. Like if you just read the lyric, you're going to be speaking in verse, So I think that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. You said in your producing career, you were focusing on producing independent literary singer-songwriters. And there was another adjective besides literary that I thought was interesting, and I now don't remember what you said. I don't know if you remember what you said or not.
I don't know.
And talk to me about the difference between, I think of hymns as not being especially literary. And I don't mean that as a negative. It's just the fact of it has to be accessible. I don't expect a hymn, for instance, to rely on an elaborate extended metaphor, although a Mighty Fortress certainly does.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually that's been one of the most difficult things about trying to learn how to hymn write. And I think I'm still on that learning curve in a big way. So I've got a long way to go. But yes, that's been one of the things that's thrown me for a loop, is that I've always relied heavily on metaphor and wordplay. Those are my favorite things.
Yeah.
And those things have to be used differently, carefully. Definitely. Metaphor is especially difficult to really do. And wordplay, anything that you do that makes people go, oh, I'm singing a song right now. Like, oh, see what he did? That's it's a bit of a failure. You don't really want to create that moment. You want people to be able to just purely worship from their heart. You said it. That's exactly right. So hymns can be, she herself has union with God, the three in one, and mystic sweet communion when something on earth is done. I don't remember. I mean, there can be really amazing lines, but again, it's more on the nose. It's going directly. I'm used to coming at things from an angle. And hymns just go right at it.
And when now I don't know if this is, I'm probably overgeneralizing here, but I think of when we use a metaphor in a hymn as distinct from other kinds of songs, it tends to be drawn from scripture or long tradition. It's not inventive.
Yeah.
It's funny how all this sounds like we're being critical, but it's a democratic approach to song.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe we are being critical, but it's like if you're playing at a polka party and you're like, I don't want to go papa. It's like, that's fine, but you shouldn't play at the polka party. So it's kind of like you can decide that polka is lame because it goes papa, but polka goes papa, so you got to do it. And that's what it is here. It's like, and there's a reason that worship music is the way that it is. It's like we're trying to put words in everybody's mouths.
Yeah.
And so you could call it misguided that we don't use extended metaphors and that we don't use like extremely clever wordplay. I'm not sure that it is misguided. And whether it is or not, it's the convention. So if you break the convention too much, you become a distraction. So that's fine. You could choose to do something else. But if you're going to choose to write worship music and maybe hymns specifically, then I think really the best is to accept the conventions of it and go, okay, where's the freedom within this? And how can I level it up? And I mean, part of the reason that I think it's such a good exercise for me is that I'm so judgmental about it. I knew for years, like, I'm so judgy about the music that we sing in church that I just know I'm going to have to try my hand at it someday and realize how hard it is. And it's even harder than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, wow. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Because what can you say that hasn't already been said? Yeah. Like, between like scripture having already said what scripture says, and then thousands of years of Christians writing songs based on the scripture, there's not a whole lot of unplowed ground. And so, yeah.
So what's okay? And thank goodness. there's not a lot of unplowed ground. But what do you do? So what do you do?
Yeah. I don't know.
That's not rhetorical.
I don't know. I think that, one thing I do is Sky Peterson and I kind of pulled Sky into the room shortly after I came into the room. And we both had the same amount of like, maybe I have a little more than her, but like willingness to sort of bend to the convention of it. But also we both share a reluctance as well in that same, reluctance to bend too much. And we both come from the same discipline because we both kind of learned how to write songs from Andrew Peterson. And so we're just a good pair because I think having her as a buddy, we get into the room and we go, today I'm feeling like playing by the rules. Let's do it. Or we go, and today I'm mad that we have to play by these rules. Let's push against them a little bit and see what we get. I'll tell you what's a joy about it. It's just like, I have always liked songwriting as puzzle working. So songwriting isn't primarily self-expression for me. It's in there. I obviously want to express something, but like I really get the pleasure when I feel like I had a concept and then I worked the puzzle and now I can see the picture, And so, the hymn writing thing, it's like, on the one hand, it's a melodic puzzle because you want to find a way to write a melody that's got a signature and that it's not just a melody that you've heard before, but you have to write it in such a way that you feel like every move is either predictable and followable, or it's a surprise, but it's the right surprise at the right time. And so it's very meticulous melody writing, which is great. That's such a discipline. Whereas, so like if you're writing a James Taylor song, you get to the second verse, second line, and you're like, there's something I want to say in this line that's going to take me a different number of syllables than it took me in the second line of the first verse. And so you go, okay. Yeah. And you just change the number of syllables. You just like say it rhythmically, however you want to say it. And then you write the third line and you go, I think I'm done. There was a fourth line in the first verse, but I don't feel like writing a fourth line in this one. I'm going to skip straight to the chorus. And that's only going to make your song cooler. Yeah. But you can't do that here. Yeah. You can, but you have to be careful because you need to take people with you. People aren't going to be listening to your song. They're going to be singing your song. And because we don't look at hymnals anymore, they're going to be singing your song without sheet music. So you got to help them as much as you can. And so I think if you're willing to accept that challenge, it's a really cool one. It's like, okay, let me learn how to write a melody that people can follow that still surprises them a little and it's interesting enough. And that's great. It's great doing that with Sky because she's got such a great melodic sense. Yeah. Another thing that's been a puzzle, just another example would be because I'm not a singer, when I'm writing songs for myself, I tend to rely on kind of rappy rhythmic phrasing, like quick punctuated kind of lines, like the way that I'm talking right now is the way that I write my songs. But because you're writing for a congregation, they want to hear themselves sing. And so for many pop songwriters, that's an easy task. But I have never written the kind of choruses where it's like, and then I get to the chorus and my voice soars and I sing long notes. Like, I don't really do that. Yeah. And so that's another thing that I'm having to go, I'm not writing for myself to deliver this song. I'm writing for the congregation to hear itself sing. And so I need to learn how to write a whole new kind of chorus. And like singer-songwriter choruses tend to like want to resolve downward at the end into this little thoughtful moment. And worship songs can do that. They definitely can. But oftentimes they actually want to not resolve down, but they want to like hit a high note at the end of the chorus, which is also just totally contrary to my tendency. So it's all that to say, that's all been about melody. I could say just as much about the lyrical challenges. You have to write in true verse. It's like your syllables have to match line for line. And then, you have to be, when you're doing that, like when I'm writing singer-songwriter music, I'm going to just bend the phrasing to make the enunciation of the line that I wanted to write work. So all the syllables are going to be enunciated correctly because I'm just going to phrase them how I want to phrase them when it's time to sing them. Yeah. But when you're writing in verse for a hymn, you got to you're going to be working with the same rhythms every verse. So you have to really work to make the accents of your syllables fall in the right places. It's very challenging.
Yeah. Are you writing with the standard meters that we're used to from hymns? You're not doing anything different?
I think I am not. I think, Sky and I are not as educated as everybody else in the room about hymnody. And I think we've decided to remain a little uneducated so that we can bring our ignorance into the convention a little bit, So I think the other guys in the room will be like, oh, is this a standard 992? Or that's not even a thing, but they can talk in those terms. And we're like, I don't know. Hadn't thought about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little while ago, you said songwriters never wrote about self-expression.
Yeah.
Which I believe. I mean, I believe you when you say that. On the other hand, you do end up expressing yourself. I mean, your 2 albums that you made, those all sound like Ben Shive. And so you have expressed yourself, even though you weren't setting out to express yourself. Right.
Right. I mean, I guess the question is, what is a self? Like, what is myself? Because I think for me, I guess expressing myself would be probably just showing the insides of my brain, like the way that my brain works and the kind of lyrics that I like. It's, I guess when I said I'm not expressing myself, I rarely sit down to go, I'm feeling this way today. Let me tell you about how I'm feeling. It tends to be more like, I had an idea.
Yeah.
I saw 2 things that went together, and let me show you how I think they correlate.
Yeah.
And I guess that is self-expression because I'm expressing my mind.
Yeah.
But I guess I think of it, it's not catharsis for me. It's not emotional catharsis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's important for a writer just to take self-expression for granted. It's going to happen. Self-expression is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not my goal. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
And when I speak, for instance, it always sounds like somebody who grew up in Georgia and spent his adult life in Tennessee. That's just kind of my accent. And it's not a function even of what I'm saying necessarily. It still sounds like me. But I've wondered. So as we've been talking, I feel like even though I could put my finger on it, what a Ben Shive song is, I'm not sure I could even do as well with that as I did with the definition of a hymn. But I feel like I can hear it when I hear it. If I were to hear some of these hymns you've been writing, would I say, oh, I think Ben might have written that?
I would think not yet. I would hope that at some point you'd be able to hear that a little bit. I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah. To some degree, though, I'm not sure if you ever will in some ways, because I really think when I'm at my best as Ben Shive, the wordplay is always happening. It's just always every syllable, if I can help it, is going to rhyme or alliterate somewhere. And then there's usually some kind of a metaphor that's the whole song. And also there's going to be like I said, it's going to have a certain kind of rappiness to it that a congregation isn't going to do easily. So there's probably some ways in which I guess the answer is no. You're just not going to be able to tell. But I'm okay with that, because I'm still writing Ben Shive songs too. But this is a different thing. Yeah. I'm curious. We were talking about self-expression a second ago. So it's been my experience. Like, one of the things that I love about songwriting is that if I create sort of a conceit for a song, or I have the idea of what the song is, just by like almost filling out the worksheet, just kind of like ticking off the boxes of writing the verses, and like especially getting into the nitty gritty, like when I go just like follow a chain of like alliterating words or words that have assonance or whatever it is, I end up accidentally saying things I didn't even know that I knew, just because I'm following the rules of the song, and I'm following the kind of poetic devices along the chain of words. And next thing I know, there's a line there, and I just said something that I didn't know that I knew. I'm curious, like, is there a corollary to that in the kind of work that you do with words?
That's a great question. I have written poems, and have experienced that to a certain degree in poems, as you're, and when I write poems, it's old fashioned rhyme, meter, all that kind of stuff. And as I am looking for words that rhyme, I think, oh, wait a minute, this is, rather than forcing the meaning to match the rhyme.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to do that. But on the other hand, sometimes those constraints, as you, I mean, it's the exact same things you're talking about are just as true for writing poems as they are for writing song lyrics. It doesn't feel quite as, I don't experience that in writing prose the way you've described.
When you've written stories, are you ever surprised by a turn that the story takes?
Yeah. I've written 4 novels, and I think maybe one ended the way I was expecting it to end. And I think it's so important. I'm sure you've experienced this in songwriting that you not hold too closely what you think this thing is about when you start, because you're not going to be there's no way you're as smart at the beginning of the process as you are deep in the process. And if I'm holding too tightly to what the idea was to start with, I'm limiting myself to what was going on. And you're also limiting yourself to your conscious mind when you do that.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe that might be one of the challenges of this hymn thing, is that there is a tendency when you go to write a hymn, you go, okay, we've got a title or at least an idea. It's better if you've got a title. And then you kind of go, probably our verses are going to take this form. Like verse 1 is going to do this, verse 2 is going to do that. You've got a sense of that. And then you spend so much time like in the trenches of the verse. But like what I heard and what you were just saying is that there's like it's like play and like mirth that happens. And I think that maybe I haven't gotten to that point as a hymn writer yet, where I'm able to just like play and stay open and like accept that the song might go somewhere different than what I expected it to do, and just have my ears open.
Yeah. Okay. So I think surprise is such an important part of the gospel, but the whole point is you think you know how this is going to end, and then you don't, and it's surprising. And so surprise is baked into the universe as as among the deepest truths of reality. You in your hymn writing, and as in your other kind of writing, you're trying to get at the deepest realities of reality. One of those is surprise. Yeah. Does that change anything about what's at your fingertips as a hymn writer? Because I hear you. I don't expect I expect my hymns to, maybe in the 4th verse we're going to talk about Judgment Day. Like we're hitting the 4. The whatever. They're. But I don't expect my hymns to really surprise me at the end. I don't expect it to be an Andy Gullahorn song.
Right. Yeah, I have been wondering if, we call what Andy Gullahorn does the turn. It's like when the last chorus turns and takes on a different meaning. And I have wondered about, could that be done in a worship song? Is there a chorus title for a worship song? I'm sure it could be. I've got my eye on that. I do know that I think because so lyrically and musically, I've had to take on new constraints and new challenges trying to write hymns. The melodic challenge and change has not been as drastic. So I feel like I've been a little quicker to figure out how to keep, like what we say is that the audience wants to be right 80% of the time. So like they want to pretty much get what they were expecting 80% of the time, but they need that 20% where they get something different than what they expect, or they're bored. Yeah. And I think that especially when Sky and I are writing melodies together, we know like there has to be something in that melody that's a little hard for them to get, just challenging enough that they go like, oh, there's this jump and I got to figure out how to do it. So I think that we've been pretty quick to figure out how to surprise people there. You can't use some of the devices. Like you're not going to tend to, so you've also got to deal with the fact that you're putting these songs in front of musicians of all stripes, of all skill levels. Yeah. So you have to be careful not to use your whole bag of chords. You got to you got to not throw too many curveballs at people. So we have to find a way to create musical depth without using every chord we know. And you also don't want to, even if they can perform some of the choices that you could make, you wouldn't want them to, because they would draw attention to themselves. Like there are certain chords that when you hear that chord, you go like, oh, Brian Wilson. Well, you don't want someone going, oh, Brian Wilson in church necessarily. You might, but you have to be careful with that, So we're having to learn new ways to create color and surprise and all of that. And then on the lyrical side, I'm just not there yet. I'm not saying we haven't written any good lyrics. I think we've actually written some good lyrics.
I think there has to be.
I don't feel like we're the best in the world yet.
Yeah.
And I think we could be that level. We could be world class if we could keep at it. I think Sky's a great writer. I know she has confidence in me. So, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, there has to be, but if surprise, if I'm telling the truth, that surprise is central to the gospel. Gospel songs have to make room for surprise.
Yeah.
I just can't think of an example of a hymn that that maybe some of the hymns that don't surprise me would have been surprising. I guess I tell you what's surprising, the third verse of oh shoot, now I put myself on the spot. The third verse of one of my very favorite hymns, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I agree. And one of my favorites is Great is Thy Faithfulness. And it's got a diminished chord, which is just basically, I don't need to go into it, but it's an expensive chord, and it's got one of those in the chorus. You don't really expect it. And it's good that it's there. So I think it's surprising, and it's got some colorful notes in it. So I think there's room for it.
Well,
but I do think, it's just, I don't think there's anything wrong with like respecting the need of the moment, like, and wanting to write something that's useful and helpful, even if it doesn't have some of the, like, I love music that drops my jaw, but I'm not trying to write music that necessarily I want it to drop that's too simplistic, because I do think a hymn can do that, but it's not going to have some wild left turn that makes you go like, oh my gosh, my mind just got blown, musically. Like, we were in D flat and now suddenly we're in G. What happened? Like, we're probably not going to do that. So I think there's something. I don't know. It sounds like I'm trying to make an apologetic for writing hymns. I think I somewhat am, because it can feel like, why would you take on all those constraints and do something like move into a form that's, that's so difficult and confining? But I think it's because ultimately, if we can do it well, it's really going to help people. Yeah. So I don't know.
You said it. You've already said it. The great pop songs 20 years from now, it's a haircut that was stylish 20 years ago. Yeah. And the hymns. When my dad died a couple of years ago, what came to me and what was comforting to me were old hymns that I knew when I was 6 years old. It wasn't, the more, let's say, the less democratized, excellent music that I've known. It wasn't Jason Isbell that was coming to me to comfort me. As much as I love what Jason Isbell does, it was those old hymns. And that we've used the word democratization a time or two, and there's real value to a hymn that we all have access to, that we're not just impressed by, but that we have access to, that feel, A Mighty Fortress feels like it belongs to me and to everybody else who sung that song since the 16th century.
Yeah. And I to kind of circle back, I think that some of doing this well is just going to be a matter of doing it a lot, partly so that I can improve, but partly so that I can just create enough material that somewhere in there's bound to be something good. I think that might be the case there. Whereas when I go to write a Shive song, I know that I'm probably going to do it most of the time. I'm going to do whatever that is, such as it is, I will do it. almost every time because I'm the only me, but
yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking like it's almost sound like if I didn't know better, it sounds like you're talking like you're not especially good at it. And I find that hard to believe.
Oh, at writing hymns?
Yeah.
It's not that I don't think I'm good at it. It's just that I'm learning, and I'm not sure if I'm certainly not better at it than my cohort. Like we're kind of all, you know what I mean? Okay. I'm not like, oh my gosh, I own this place. I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah. But again, it's not that interesting who's better at writing hymns and who. You do what you do, and the people around you do what they do. And Isaac did what he could do. And, it's not especially interesting question of who's better at it.
Yeah. Kristen Getty always quotes, I think it's Wordsworth. Some great poet said that the English hymn is the hardest thing to write, like the hardest thing to write. So I just comfort myself with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are the hymn writers who make you want to go write some more hymns?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so I didn't grow up on a whole lot of hymns, and
really?
I do read them now, but I don't always read who the authors are. So I'm just not very educated. I guess so. The answer, good or bad, is the people in my circle. Yeah. Like when Matt Boswell writes a lyric, I go, okay, that's the standard. That's how that's done. Kristen Getty actually too is a really, really strong hymn writer. She just understands what the convention is. And then Matt Papa is kind of probably the best melody writer in the group. He just knows how to write a melody that makes people want to sing. Kind of makes people's voices soar. So those are probably the people that are the most inspiring to me. Yeah, I have started reading. Somebody gave me Spurgeon's old hymnal. I mean, it didn't belong to Spurgeon. It's a published book called Spurgeon's Own Hymnal or something like that. And so I read hymns out of there. Those are great. I read the metrical, I guess the Scottish like metrical psalms out of there. Yeah. Those are helpful.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
All right, man. We should probably wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you. This is great.
I'm so glad to know that you are writing songs that we're going to be singing. And as much I really love the songs that you write for for your own self and for the trained professionals to sing. But I'm excited to see what happens when you write stuff for me to sing.
Thanks. And thanks for having me on. Thanks for asking such thoughtful questions. This helped me think through what I'm doing.
Excellent.
Appreciate it. All right. Good to talk to you.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com. And to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.